Hello, welcome to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom. And man, today you all are in for a treat. We have a legend here, Brandon Steiner, and he is going to grace us with all of his knowledge and wisdom over entrepreneurship, over branding. I mean, he's wrote several books. He's in the middle of writing another one right now. He's turned a $4,000 company into a $35 million annual sales company. Like I said, a legend. So happy to have you here, Brandon. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. What's weird is I built a couple different companies, but having built Steiner, Steiner is not with Steiner anymore. Steiner Sports. Now I'm with Collectible Exchange. So very grateful to have this new second wind. I started this company 4 years ago. I'm still booking athletes and still creating a lot of collectibles and doing all kinds of things, but it's been an amazing run. When I look back at the run, the ups and downs, I think you have to be grateful. This is like the one thing I've learned recently. I just like to share with, you have to be grateful for the things that you didn't like that have happened to you. There's some things that I did not like that have happened to me, and you have to kind of love those things and be grateful for those things because life is hard. It's not good. You're not pitching a shutout. And I think for me, those things, when I look back on them, what you feel is devastating. It's like when you're a kid, you scrape your knee, you thought it was the end of the world. And then, do you even remember that now? No. So, and that's how I feel like some of the setbacks in business, they're devastating, they're setbacks, but then they also kind of get you coming back a little stronger. You come back a little bit more smarter. I was just telling you before, I was always the hardest working person in the room. Mm-hmm. My mom was always you got to be smartest person in the room. Not only hardest working, I combine that, I call it smartsmanship. And that is a combination of hard working and smart working. And I think that it's very, very difficult to have the confidence to do both. You meet people that are incredibly hardworking. You meet people that are really smart, but they can't bend over, pick up a piece of paper. And what you really want to strive to do is have a combination of both. Not be afraid to roll up your sleeves, but also don't be afraid to just stop and pause and take a little bit of time to think, because you'd be surprised if you get most people. One of the things that hold them back is their ability not to have any time to think and really think about what the next step is. One of my favorite lines is, you got to have POP. And POP is progress on process. Stop, don't focus on the result, focus on your process and start thinking about don't chase the money, chase the things that make the money. And it's you got to start thinking about the things you're doing, and you got to break it down. Are you in good shape? Are you in good health? Are you getting the right rest? Are you approaching customers the right way? Do you have the best employees around you? Or are you kind of lazy? You don't really want to fire this one, or you don't want to upgrade this one. It's all those little grains of sand is what equals the beach. It's so when you progress on your, if you really progress on your process, that's what gets you to extraordinary. That's what gets you to great. And people think, that's no big deal. I'm going to let that go. No, everything matters. And you got to be willing to go through those grinds of, letting somebody go, bringing somebody new in, training them, developing a new relationship, going to sleep a little earlier, working out a couple more days a week than you were. All those things are a pain in the ass. It ain't easy.
It is. Yeah, it is. I think most people fall to those challenges, right? You don't want to do those things that are really uncomfortable or those hard things, and you kind of shy away from them, and it stunts your growth. But I mentioned you before we even, went live here, you knew even when you were younger, you knew you were going to be great. And you said, I knew I'd outwork people. And you had already this innate ability and knowledge around being able to do that. Not everyone is equipped like that. They truly don't believe that they can be great or that they're going to outwork people. What kind of differentiates that for people?
Well, first of all, I think everybody does have the ability to be extraordinary and great. And entrepreneurism and is, first of all, I never wanted to be great. I never wanted to be successful. I wanted to be the only. I wanted to be the best at something. I wasn't interested in just being pretty good. And that's the choice. I have nothing against people that say, I'm really good at this. I make a nice living. I'm good. That's a choice, and I respect it. I don't. But to me, I just wanted to be, that guy. Do you know who that guy is? I want to be one of those people. And, it takes a tremendous commitment. And also there are sacrifices along the way. And then when you get to become that person, there's some things you have to deal with as well, because you have to be able to unravel out of that mindset of always trying to do better, always trying to progress, always trying to do more. Only a few people become Derek Jeter, Hank Aaron. These are incredibly highly competitive people. And when you get to a certain top of the mountain, nobody ever stays there. Remember, nobody ever stays. So you have to be able to unwind out of that and be able to sit back and enjoy kind of that process, right? So when I was a kid, I always thought that I was going to be successful. The question I was wondering is like what I was going to do, and if I could find something that would be really unusual, unique, and maybe be the best at it. I knew I didn't have the sports talent. Like I wasn't one of these guys that flew 80 miles an hour, my arm went out.
Yeah.
I love sports, but there was really no real sports business back when I was a kid. I wasn't one of these guys that thought, oh, wow, one day I'm going to be in the NBA, any of that kind of thing. Like I have very mediocre talent, even though I love sports. But I love the hustle. Like I love the entrepreneurism. And I think, what really gives me that ability, and why I think people out there have that ability, is the highest level of entrepreneurism comes from the highest level of common sense. Because if you really want to get into an entrepreneurial mindset, if you're sitting there going like, I want to do better, I want to do more, right? The first thing you want to think about is get out of your head and start thinking about what other people are thinking, and get into what other people are feeling, what other people are doing. And that's called empathy and compassion. So if you can increase your empathy and compassion, which is the definition of empathy, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. You have to get out of your head about what you need, what you want, what you think, and start thinking about what other people are thinking. When you start thinking about what other people are thinking and feeling, that's when the white space pops up. You go, wow. So now that's how you get yourself. That's a bridge to get yourself into an entrepreneurial mindset, is increase your common sense and stop. If you want to fill yourself, forget yourself, like get out of your head. And then the other thing is that, you remember when you were 11, like the level of curiosity, you didn't stop asking questions. You thought that pretty much you could be anything you wanted to be, and your enthusiasm was through the roof. So I think that, I always judge, like, how can you can control your enthusiasm, and you can control your curiosity. So when you combine enthusiasm and curiosity along with empathy, compassion towards others, that's when you go and see ideas that you never even thought about. So every great idea I've ever thought about is thinking about what it was like to be one of my customers, thinking about what it was like to be the person next door and what they're going through. And that's
so what was that for you? What was that for you when you started Steiner Sports?
Well, first of all, it started when I was like 12, when I was delivering newspapers, frankly. I mean, I was having trouble getting people to sign up, and nobody would do it. And I knocked on this woman's door. Whoever opened up the most accounts win a box of candy bars. And I knocked on this 75-year-old woman's door, and I know she got the paper delivered, so a stack of them right in the doorway. And she said, "No, I don't want to get the paper delivered." I said, "Ma'am, it's 8 cents for me." Or the corner store says, "Yeah, but then I got to tip you." And I go home. I say, "Mom, we got to move out of this neighborhood. This neighborhood sucks. These people are cheap. It's no good." And my mother says, "Sit down. Sit down. I'm going to teach you something. You got to stop selling. You got to start serving. You got to start solving. You got to be a solution-based business person." Now, I go back. I'm knocking on doors. Because in Brooklyn, where I live, there was a lot of apartment buildings. And I thought for sure I'd be able to open up a lot of accounts. But I got nothing. I went back at 11 o'clock at night, knocked on this lady's door. I said, "Ma'am, torrential downpour, snowstorm, ice on the ground, heat wave. You shouldn't be out with weather like this. If I bring you milk and bagels on Wednesday and Sunday and then a paper every day by 7:30, would you get the paper delivered?" She said, "You would do that?" I said, "I was concerned." And I didn't know that, but she was like the mayor. She turned me on to the whole neighborhood, and I quadrupled my paper route. What's interesting about that story is when I think about the beginning of my road, which was really, is that as a 12-year-old, I was able to put myself in a 75-year-old woman's head to think about what she was thinking, what she was troubled by. And it was the weather, and things weren't going right. A woman like that really couldn't go outside. So the question I'm thinking, if you're listening, it's like, first of all, are you really listening to your customers? Are you trying to solve problems for them? Because some of the problems may have nothing to do with the business that you're in, but if you can help people solve problems, that's the value proposition that you need to have to really find your entrepreneur spirit and to grow your business. And by the way, value is, which nobody talks about this, but value is what you can do for someone that they can't do for themselves. That's everything. That's value. And at the end, it's like, you really got to make sure that, nobody's getting rid of somebody that's valuable. So, you want to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and use your common sense. I was thinking, how is this lady getting the paper when the weather's bad? And then if I get her some milk, bagels, and some other stuff, she probably could use my help. She'll probably tip me a little more. And I didn't know she was going to turn me out to the whole neighborhood. And that kind of thinking was the initiator. Thank God my mother sat me down, and she was never a soft shoulder. And whenever I run into these problems, she was never a soft shoulder. Oh, poor baby. No, she's like, no, you got to do better. You got to think about this.
Yeah.
And she give me another way of thinking about it. And I think that's what I'm trying to, hopefully, the people that listen to this conversation will grab from this is do not think about your business only the way you're thinking about it. And the way you get out of that mindset is by increasing your common sense, increase your compassion, your empathy, increase your curiosity, ask questions, start increasing your level of enthusiasm, even if things are not going well. Do you know Jack? I'm sorry, I'm on a little rant, but do you know who Jack Taylor is?
Yeah, no, good.
I've never told this story before, but I'm going to tell it to you today. But do you know who Jack Taylor is? Do you know who Jack Taylor is?
I don't.
Okay, Jack Taylor is the founder of Enterprise Car Rental. Now, for those of you out there that don't know this, Enterprise Car Rental is the largest car rental agency in the world. It's bigger than Avis, Hertz, and the third biggest all combined. That's how big it is. Jack Taylor was in the Navy. He came out of the Navy, went to work for Cadillac at a dealership. He had 4 cars, and what would happen is people go into the dealership. They have an accident, their car would break down, they need a replacement car. And he'd rent out one of his 4 cars, and before you know it, the 4 turned into 8, 8 turned into 12. They're about, I think, a $30 billion company now, Enterprise, huge. And do you know where most of their revenue comes from? They're a car rental agency, so take a guess.
Yeah, renting cars.
No. So that's what you would think. That's what a normal person would think, is that you go to an airport, you're touring somewhere, you go to another country, you rent a car. But 85% of Enterprise's business comes from replacement cars, body shops, insurance companies. 85% of the revenue. Wow. So the question is the riches are in the niches. Jack Taylor figured out a niche. There was nothing that complicated about the rent-a-car business, like a lot of our businesses. But the question is your head on a swivel? Are you able to adjust your mindset and think about what's going on around you as opposed to what you think you see? So I'm going to give you another thing that adds on to the story, and that is elephants. Do you know elephants die?
No.
I mean, they live a pretty long life, right? They're a relatively big animal. Well, what elephants do is they eat for 17 hours a day. It's true. They eat all day. They poop a bunch, have a little sex when they can, and they sleep for about 5-6 hours. This is just the truth of the matter. I'm not here to alter it or anything, but you would think, elephants live a pretty long life, but you know how elephants die is they die of malnutrition, not of old age. And the reason they die of malnutrition is because for 17 hours of eating branches, leaves, everything else, most elephants, actually all elephants, get 2 sets of teeth. And because they're eating so many hours, the second set of teeth gets whittled down to the point where they can't eat anymore to fill and keep themselves, with enough food, and they die of malnutrition. So most elephants do not live their lifelong potential. They die of malnutrition because their teeth are worn down and they can't eat. So if you're listening out there, and how I hope this story pertains to you is that, first of all, don't be an elephant. You have to adjust to the times. You have to be able to look and be able to see the different opportunities and adjust to be able to move away from certain things that you think is the right way to go. But think about what's going to be going on in the future. Imagine if an elephant knew that at some point that the second set of teeth are going to wear down, they won't be able to eat. They probably would eat differently. Maybe they eat more grass. They try to find more berries and seeds and not wear the teeth down with branches and things like such. So at the end of the day, if you think about it, the riches are in the niches. You got to find things that are different and look at your business differently. And if not, you're going to end up like an elephant. And your business life is going to end up being a lot shorter than it should be. So if you want to live the fullest business life that you want to have, you need to be able to get your head on a swivel, find the niches in your business, and look at your business differently. And the way you do that is by hitting the most unfrequent button on your remote control. You know what that is? The button on your remote control that you do not use the most is the pause button. I didn't say stop. I didn't say fast forward or rewind. Just pause. Take a minute to breathe and think, because that's what God gave you, the ability to adjust and adapt, which no other species on the planet has other than humans, to adjust and adapt. So that if we know we only have 2 sets of teeth, we're not going to wear our teeth down and die of malnutrition. That's incredibly stupid. But they can't adjust. They can't adapt. And nobody can tell that elephant, hey, slow down. Don't eat all those branches. Your teeth are going to wear down. So if you're out there and you're running a business, don't be an elephant. Find the niches. Think about what Jack Taylor took, a simple business and found something completely different that no one else was thinking about, which is replacement cars. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Simple.
I love it. So much of what you're saying, it is amazing, and it resonates. And I know that people are listening are going, oh my gosh, that's genius. That's brilliant. But what's coming up to me is like kind of what we talked about earlier, is that we have this ability to pause and be aware and see things differently, but you get in your own way. You know, you had mentioned earlier, right, that like 70 to 80% of our thoughts are negative. So for most people, they're stuck in this space of only thinking they have this certain value. They can only provide what they know how to provide. They're limited by fear and not taking those risks. So it's like there's really this need to get out of your head and be like abundant about, geez, the opportunity and the possibilities out there.
I think so. I mean, listen, at the end, you know, you have 60,000 thoughts in a day and 70% are negative. So you're battling with your own mindset along with all the craziness that's going out between your competition, your employees, and everything else you're trying to deal with. So, you know, it's a battle. I mean, you know, life is hard. You know, business life is hard. I mean, it's not easy. The more you can prepare for difficulty and brace yourself for difficulty as often as you can, so when you run into it, it won't be as big a deal. You know, I remember the first time I couldn't get paid by somebody. It was like early in my career. This guy owed me, I think it was like $3,000. And at the time, my wife was doing my accounting, and she's like, where'd you go? I said, I went to go collect my money. She's like, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? The guy owed me the money. I went to his house. She's like, you can't do that. It's part of business. Like, sometimes people aren't going to pay you. And you can get a lawyer, you can go fight. You can't go to people's houses. That's like what you did when you were in Brooklyn when you were 10 years old. And so, you know, I've learned that, like, losing money sometimes, which used to really aggravate me because sometimes people owe me money, the receivables. Sometimes people are going to screw you. Now, you can go spend 2 weeks agonizing over it, and it's not fun when you owed money and don't get paid. But if you think that's never going to happen if you own a business, then you're not preparing. And think about the 2 weeks you wasted where you could have been doing something more productive. So I try to minimize that kind of thinking. I think that a lot of people don't get to their extraordinary path because, one, they don't think it's going to work out for them. They've come up with a story, even though it's not true. Something happened when they were younger. They saw something happen. They didn't see it work out for them, so they think that's going to happen to them. But, you know, I think a big part of business success is having faith. And faith is looking at something but you can't see it. So you got to believe that you're on this planet for good reason, to do something really good, to find your best self. And sometimes you just can't see it. You got to believe that there are things that have been placed here to help you and guide you. And it doesn't mean that's the end all and everything, but you have to believe that faith is part of the equation. And I've learned, like, you can either have faith or fear, but you can't have both. So either you're faithful or fearful, but you can't have both. So you got to decide, like, and I always say, you know, take action over anxiety. You know, anxiety will really tear you up. And you got to move. You got to move. You got to move, and you got to move, and you got to move. And I think for me, one of the things I've learned when I get into a little bit of a, down period is realizing that this too shall pass, but I got to keep going. You know, sitting around and pondering over it really doesn't accomplish a whole lot, and life is short. And yes, it's going to be a grind when you're working yourself out of a hole, but what other choice you got? You know, but when you try something, there's only two things that are going to happen. You're not going to die. You know, I always tell people always say, don't be afraid to fail. Like, really? I'm afraid to fail, still to this day. But don't be afraid to try.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, listen, you're not going to die from trying. I tried it. All right, now you're going to die. No. If anything, you'll learn a lesson. You'll learn something. Something good will happen. You'll be able to pick up something along the way. But I think sometimes people get so caught up and worked up about what happens if this doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, answer that. What happens? And I think to me, like,
exactly.
I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for some of the people that have inserted in my life. Some of them have been older, younger. I'm a big fan of younger mentorship. I use a lot of younger kids now to help me. Everybody's like kind of down on the young kids because they're a little different than I would say I am, but they are efficient. They get a lot done a lot quicker than we ever did. And, they've taught me a lot about social media, about how a lot of these apps and different things you can maneuver to get information. And I reverse mentor them. I teach them about some of the things I've learned, and it's a good combination. So I think it's important not to outwork yourself, not to outgrow yourself out of the business you're in. There's constantly new stuff evolving. No matter how good you were at it, there's somebody coming around the corner that's thinking about doing it bigger, better, smarter. And the faster you get caught up with them, the better.
Absolutely. Well, you have a book out, and we're talking all about this fearlessness, and you're not going to die trying. And one of the books you wrote was You Got to Have Balls. That in essence is that, right? Like, you got to try, you got to take some risks, be
that was my
fearless
mother's favorite
in a
line.
sense.
That was my mother's favorite line.
I like your mom more and more every single line you give me from her.
My mother was a businesswoman, and back in the '60s, owned businesses, never took any shit from anybody. Especially back then, like men, they were just running everything. Women were nurses and secretaries and housewives. And my mother wanted no part of that. And she's like, be relentless. Go all the way. Why stop? Why? Like, look at that business. We go into businesses all the time. Look at that business. Look at that sign. Look at the service here. Look at the way that guy's dressed. Look at the way these shelves are. She was always just pointing out how much more you could do with a business. Her mind was just so creative. But she also showed me how to run businesses, take care of customers, and things like that at an early age, which I'm very grateful for. So, my mother had an unusual way. I always said, like, facts tell, stories sell. So I was in fourth grade at the time, and I had a speech impediment, and I was really having trouble speaking clearly. I talk like this, and my mother's like, if you talk like that, you're going to end up like, you have no career. You can't. So she sends me to a speech pathologist. And after about 2 weeks, I come home one day. I said, Mom, I'm not going to speech pathologist. She said, I don't want to do it. So really? So the next day, my mother had picked me up from school once in my entire life. Once.
Really?
In the fourth grade. She came, she was waiting outside, and in the car when she was there, come on, we're going to go for a ride. And we go for a ride, and we travel about 2 miles, and we park behind a sanitation truck. We get out of the truck, she goes, Joe, I want you to meet my son. This is Brandon. He's interested maybe in becoming a sanitation worker. Can you show him around the truck? Maybe you could drive around, show him the benefits, and show him what it's like to, do your job every day and go through everything. So I get in the truck with him. He showed me around and all that stuff. And I get back in the car. And my mother's like, listen, if you don't want to go to this pathologist, I thought this is a potentially good career for you. It's probably where you're going to end up. And the next day I said, okay, I'll go back to the speech pathologist.
Oh my gosh, she's genius.
So, I tell people, it's like, facts tell, stories sell.
Yes.
So, when you're creating your entrepreneur spirit about a product, yes, it's important to have the facts, but it's also important to be able to story tell about that product and how that product relates to the people that you're trying to sell it to. And I think that the coaches and the managers and the people that run businesses that can story sell and tell relatable stories that people can relate to your product, relate to you, is a huge, huge help. And I think it's been a big help in me creating my businesses is that, I try to get real with my products, and I try to make sure that products that I'm creating have a connection to the people that are buying them. They understand why they're buying them and that there's love and everything I'm putting into those products. And so far, that's worked out pretty good for me.
Yeah, I'd say so. But it's so true, and even more now relevant about, story selling than before, because our attention span now and the time that people want to give, like whatever you're trying to sell me better be entertaining at the same time and capture my attention, or, you're onto something else. So I think that is very, very key about it. You've done so much work as far as branding is concerned, and really helped people step into owning their own brand and entrepreneurship, which is really important too, instead of treating your business like this product, but more of a brand and you and going into the story. Tell us a little bit about that as far as those key pieces to really create that profitable and, brand that people know.
I think the mistake listen, I'm a schemer, dreamer, I like to, I'm a pretty creative guy, but I think when it comes to my brand and it comes to the marketing, people say, Brandon, you're this marketing genius. I've sold over $50 million of dirt. I've secured over 30 million autographs. I've done some really crazy things. But I think for me, like, when it comes to my brand, it's getting down to the absolute honest truth. Like, can you get down to the honest truth, even if it embarrasses you a little bit? But when you get to the honest truth, that's what really connects you with people, with your brand. And there's no messing around with it. You got to get serious about your brand. It's not an easy thing to put together. It's a thing that is larger than sometimes even your product, and even larger than you. And you can't compromise with it. And even when I was really small, I was just getting started out, I was fanatical about my brand, fanatical about my logo, fanatical about my small little office that I set up. You walked in, it's like, wow, this place is cool. Like, it's 2,000 square feet. And, I was just fanatical, and it was just the absolute truth. It was just the absolute I always say the brilliance is in the basics. Don't overthink it, just overdo it. And I think sometimes people overdo it. They try to get too cute. They try to get too cutesy and everything. Like, no, get down deep into what you really believe in and what you really feel, and think about what it is you represent and express it. And I've been able to do that, and I think it's worked well for me. Like, my mom taught me that. Her salon, one of the early businesses that she created was a salon. It was Evelyn Sachs was her name, and big red sign in the middle of Brooklyn, Evelyn Sachs Salon, and it was a completely, in those days it was just completely crazy looking salon, but there was like who my mother was. She changed the color of her hair every other week, and she just lived it. She lived it. She expressed it. So when you went in there, you felt like you were going into this really funky place, which set you up to be comfortable changing the color of your hair, changing the style. Like now, people change the color of their hair all the time. But back in the 60s, my mother was a color specialist. And so I walk in a room, I immediately know whether a woman needs, she needs the roots. The roots are no good. You probably need to put in some highlights in there. It's really messed up. Like when I see clients, I'm like, I love what you do with your hair. Like, I haven't seen you in 3 months. Like, I'm like, I know it's crazy, but so
you just see it, yeah.
But on that notion, like, just another point about business, like, business is a game. It is just a game. It's about scoring points. How do you score points? You score points by reaching out to your customers when you're not trying to sell them something, but you score points by doing stuff for your customers that don't make a sale, but they help them. It's adding value. It's getting behind what your customers are into, whether it be their charity or getting behind something that maybe they're trying to do with their kids. Those are all the points. Like, you got a good product, but having a good product doesn't necessarily create loyalty.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I have a really good product. I made a good sale. It doesn't mean they're coming back. People come back because they love you. Love creates loyalty, not like. So, at the end of the day, you have to do something that's remarkable, replicable, relatable, reachable. Like, those are things that need to happen to not only get the business, but keep the business and keep the business. When you have a loyal customer, not only they're coming back, but they're taking everybody else with you, and they'll pay a little bit more. They'll spend a little bit more. They'll go out of the way because they trust you and they love you. So the goal is not to have a customer, but to have a fan. And the goal is not to get likable products, but to have people love you, because you'll go out of your way to do business with somebody you love.
True. And, you talk about business being that game. You really have to love the game that you're playing, because without that, people don't connect to it. You can put yourself out there and play this game, but if it's all work and no play and you're not loving it, people see through that. And it kind of brings up the other book that you have written, Living on Purpose.
Yeah.
And with all the success and everything that you've been, accomplishing and the companies that you've built, there's an element to you too, though, that is not all business, that you're living on purpose, and there's a whole lot of joy in there.
Well, the transparency is, it makes it real. Like, I don't think my family's that happy about that book, but if you're in your 40s, I don't know if there's a better book to read, because it's about to tell you into the shitstorm you're about to get into, which is a lot of things are going to change. Not all bad, not all good, but you're going to go through some pretty important changes as you get into your later 40s. Your kids are getting older, your body's changing, your body's breaking down. There's a whole bunch of things, and if you don't prepare for it, your 50s and 60s is going to be not the most pleasant time, or they could be the greatest time you ever have in your life. And that's why the reason I wrote that book, because when I turned 50, I was just like, wow, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And also, you got to be prepared to change your flock. Like, your friends change, people start moving away. It's hard when you get older to make friends. And it's important to learn how to do that. Like, there's an art to making friends when you're an adult. You have to lay out your intent. Sure. It's like, hey, I like you, and I think we got to be friends. I remember somebody walking up to me saying, Brandon, I've heard a lot about you, and I'd like to get to know you because we need to become like best friends, and I'm ready to work on this. Like, the guy just laid out his intent. He's like, no, and he was a really important guy, pretty prestigious guy, and he was like, I've heard a lot about you, Brandon, and I'm definitely going to make you one of my new best friends, and I'm ready to work hard to make that happen. So let's hang out, let's do some stuff together so we can become friends. And we did. But he laid it out.
Are you friends?
Yeah, and he didn't dibble-dabble around. I think adults, like when you're kids, you just become friends with people, and it just kind of happens. Yeah. You're in the same class, you play in the same park. But as adults, it gets kind of difficult. So changing your flock and being able to adopt and make new friends as you get older is really important, because, you don't want to get isolated. And as your as your kids' parents start moving away and your neighbors start changing, it's hard to and those are all part of, keeping your life kind of full, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've written this book that tells people, this takes me back to the elephant story. If they knew that their teeth were going to whittle away to nothing, right, they would do different things. And in this book, like, somebody can literally read this and know what's coming and be proactive about it, instead of saying, gosh, I wish somebody would have told me, this and that. So I think it's a great read. And
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I love that book. Yeah. I think it's probably my best work. I mean, I've written like 2,500 blogs. I'm half illiterate, by the way, which is the whole irony of it. Written 3 books, and I've had a TV show and a radio show, and had the speech impediment. Literally, almost flunked the SAT test. But so it just shows you, like, if you put your mind to something, you can always find a way to express yourself through different mediums. And if not, my mother's favorite line, if not you, then who? It's like, if you start walking around, I don't know if I could do that. You talk yourself out of, I've talked myself out of more deals. I've gotten off the highway so many times. It's unbelievable. It's outrageous. And then I get back on the highway, go, Frank, get back on the highway. Are you kidding me? Yeah. You got to have balls.
It happens.
And so you got to be careful the story you tell yourself. And, for me, you're not going to die. Try it. Take action over anxiety, make something happen. And most importantly, try to be authentic about what you're doing. So that inconvenience, by the way, when you're authentic, because everybody's, oh, I'm authentic. Be authentic when somebody says, okay, meet me at 11 o'clock tonight, and you got concert tickets, throw those in the garbage because your friend needs you. Like that kind of authentication. Are you going to really be there for when people need you? And I think that kind of, I would say, commitment is not convenient. And I think that if you're thinking that you're going to go show up, work at 5 to 9, leave 5 after 5, and think because you stay till 5:15 that you worked late, like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it probably won't lead you to extraordinary.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, you have laid out so many one-liners. And I tell you, everything you tell me from your mom, I feel like we need a book of everything Evelyn right now, because... Oh, yeah. I want it. Please.
My mother's, you read the Balls book, that's everything my mother taught me. and I made a ton of money. I'm one of those kids that listen to his mother. Young kids come to me and say, what would you advise me? I'm like, just listen to your mom. Like, there's no way a man is ever going to do, like, there's no way a husband is going to do what a woman does in a day. This is not going to happen. I mean, and women generally are smarter than men, just for everybody out there listening. Like, it's just the way it is. Women are smarter. Women are more accountable. Women are they're just better than us. Doesn't mean that we're worthless. So women are kind of, they don't want to tell us how worthless we are all the time because that would hurt our feelings. But, just women are just a lot more put together in a much bigger, smarter way. I always argue with my mother, like, why are women and men never going to be equal? And my mother's like, because women are superior. And we just don't tell men that often because, they're a lot more sensitive and we don't want to hurt their feelings. So, but I've had so many trials and tribulations with growing up with my mom who never, ever, I tell people, it's like, you want to help your kids, stop helping them. Like, your job is to get your kids bulletproof ready, war ready, not be their best friend and make it easy for them. Yeah. When I hear parents go, I just want my kids to have the child, I want them to grow up with the childhood that I didn't have. I'm like, oh God, really? Like, really, who said your kid wants your childhood that you didn't have? Like, well, your job is to go give your child the best childhood they can to prepare themselves so when they're an adult, they have the bulletproof vest on, they're ready to go deal with the difficulties because life is really difficult. And you need to make sure that your kids are ready to deal with difficulty, not by making life easy for them, but letting them handle some of the difficulties and watch them scrape their knees and watch them deal with difficult.
Have to. Too many kids are sheltered these days, and it just sets them up for, that fear and that failure later and not knowing how to cope. So I think you've won over all the women out there today, Brandon, for sure, by saying we are superior. I'm not even going to argue that. And also by telling the kids to listen to their mothers. That's going to be the moral of this whole podcast.
Who's looking out for you more than your mom? I mean, for God's sake.
It's true.
I'll just tell you one more quick story here, just for a while. So my wife comes to bed one night. I don't recommend this for all these out there, but my wife comes to bed and says, you know how hard it is to get your daughter up in the morning? I'm like, how hard could it be? She says, well, you do it. So I go into Nicole's room and say, Nicole, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning at 10 to 8. 5 to 8, I'll give you another call. 5 after 8, after you brush your teeth and got dressed, if you're downstairs eating breakfast, by 10 after 8, I'm going to give you $5. Now, remember, this is 30 years ago, right? So
right.
I go over to our room at 10 to 8. She's already dressed. She's brushing her teeth. 5 to 8, I go back just to see if she's okay. She's already downstairs. I go downstairs. It's 10 after 8. She's dressed, ready, eating breakfast. She says, Dad, I'm ready to go to school. As I said, Mom says it's difficult to get you up. She says, I have no idea what she's talking about. She says, but meantime, Dad, I want my $5. I want it now.
Oh, my gosh.
And the lesson is that, you can negotiate with your kids to bring out a point, to bring out the light. I don't like to negotiate everything with my kids, but you can have fun in finding a path with your kids to challenge, to see to show them the way. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Like, easiest $5 I ever made. I bet your mom 10. I have you down here ready to go. And, it's like you got to have fun in the process of disciplining and guiding. Because really, as parents, really what you really are more consultants. When you get to a certain level with your children, particularly as you move towards high school, you become more of a consultant than a parent. So, and then that takes on probably a more difficult role of, waiting for them to come to you with the questions. But so you got to take advantage of as much as you can when they're young. And then as they get older, you realize you got to step back and you got to hope that the parenting and the stuff you've shared together, put them in the right direction. I bring it up because in the purpose book,
that's a good story.
My favorite chapter is the parenting chapter. And so it's one of my favorite chapters in the Living on Purpose book, because who wants to admit that maybe they're not as good a parent as they should be? Nobody. So I just went around to the best parents I could find, went to parenting gurus, therapists. I tried to get as many tips, and that's the whole chapter. What the hell do I know about parenting? But I wanted to be a good parent. I didn't want to go down going, that Steiner guy made a shitload of money. He was a pretty good husband. So parent. Because I asked my kids, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rank me? And I was like, I got like a 6. One of them said 7. I'm like, what? I thought it would be like a 9 or 10. I'm like, no, I gotta. So I started going on this whole role about how to parent better. And it's a process. And then, you got to make sure that you got the ability to realize, like, just because you're parenting one way doesn't mean it's the perfect way. And it's not easy to go get feedback on your parenting. So you got to go pick up a couple books and read about this kind of thing, because being a better parent's doable.
It is. It's the harder work, right? My husband and I say all the time, ours are 17 and 19 now. And I'm like, it's easy to raise crappy kids. It's hard to raise really great kids. It's work, but definitely well worth it.
Yeah. You can parent your kids to success. And 17-year-old is probably the hardest parenting you do, because they're a senior in high school. You're hoping they're going to come home. You have no idea where they're at. They tell you where they're at someplace, but most kids lie 1 out of 5 things they tell you. And I'm not exaggerating. You were a young kid at one point. You told your parents the truth on everything? No.
Oh, gosh.
So no. You got to remember, 1 out of 5, at least, things that they're telling you isn't true. And they got the keys to the car. They think they're smarter and bigger than they really are. I think parenting a kid who's a senior in high school that already knows they're on their way to college is really hard. It's as hard as parenting as you're going to find.
Yeah. 17. I say 17 is the hardest year by far. It is.
It really is.
Well, this has been amazing, from business to branding to parenting. Thank you so much for joining and sharing all your insights and your mom's insights too. I mean, I just love it. And
thank you.
For everyone listening, I mean, gosh, you're going to have to listen to this twice, because there were just so many nuggets in there that you got to write down and put into action. So
the books are free on Collectible Exchange, by the way. I didn't promote much, but you go to Collectible Exchange, just go look up the books and you just pay for shipping, and they're free. If you pick out one of the books you want, love sharing them. And so, go on Collectible Exchange, and I mean, there's like 150,000 collectibles on there, which is another story, but you can pick up the book for free, no problem. Or message me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn, Facebook guy, by the way.
Okay, awesome. You guys heard it there. Brandon Steiner, find him on LinkedIn, Facebook. Check out the website, the Collectible Exchange, and get the book.
Thank you.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us, Brandon.